My name is Jeremy Beer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of American Philanthropic. I do have a Scotch with me. The whole idea of these Scotch talks is that they're very casual, the kind of thing you might do over a drink, where we all together in the flesh right now. So very casual. I generally am not, it's 1 o'clock where I am in Phoenix. I generally am not drinking Scotch at 1 o'clock on a Thursday. I always feel compelled to say that. Or obligated to say that so that people don't have an intervention for me or something like that. Trust me, it's not my usual habit, but it's not the worst thing in the world. With me are two of our really talented consultants. At least at the top for me is Carmen Natchke, digital strategist with our direct response team. Carmen has been doing this for over 20 years, marketing and direct response. She's also an expert in data analytics. She's built a data analytics tool for us. She's very, very bright. She's worked in the for-profit world for companies like IKEA, Martha Stewart Living, things like that. And you worked at NASA too, right, Carmen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like literally on rocket science or something. At least that's what I'm going to say. Was it rocket science? Can we say you did rocket science?
Somewhat.
All right.
Yeah.
Good enough for me. Good enough for me. So Carmen brings a wealth of experience, excuse me, and expertise to this conversation. Someone who bridges the for-profit and nonprofit worlds. And then Stephanie Danselmi. Carmen's coming to us, I believe, from the Miami area. Correct, Carmen?
From Florida, yeah.
Yeah. And then Stephanie is in Rome, Italy, which is that's our commitment to letting you work from remote, right, Stephanie?
That's right. It's definitely a very appropriate time to have a drink here. It's 10 p.m.
yeah, you're having a beer, and that's totally appropriate in Rome, especially. Stephanie joined us how long? A couple years ago now, Stephanie? 2 or 3 years ago?
About a year and a half.
Year and a half. From WHYY, which is Philadelphia's public media station. She did a lot of work for them on direct response and digital fundraising, membership, and all sorts of things. For that, she was at Hope International and is a Templeton Honors College graduate, one of our favorite places here at AmPhil. So that is who we're going to be speaking to today. They will be leading us through. I've got some questions to start from them, but I do want to hear from you. This usually doesn't go on a script. I've got some questions. I don't even know where I'm going to go ultimately, but certainly you all can help direct the conversation. Thank you all for being with us. And thank you to those of you who have shared who you're with in the chat box. It's great to have you all here. All right. Let's start with a very basic question. Stephanie, I'm going to go to you. First of all, what are we talking about? I always start this way, every Scotch talk, to make sure people very widely varied experience on these things. What are we talking about when we talk about direct response, in particular, maybe digital direct response?
Sure. So direct response is pretty simple. It's just anytime you're specifically asking someone to do something. So when you have a clear call to action and a one-to-one relationship, it can be you're sending a mailer, asking someone to donate, it can be an email, you can do direct response on your website. Anywhere you're directly asking your constituents to donate is direct response.
And digital direct response, what are the kind of the techniques we're usually talking about when we talk about digital direct response?
Sure. For me, it's generally email. Email is my bread and butter, and it is typically the digital channel that has the highest conversion. So you should spend a lot of time in your other digital channels getting email addresses when possible. Carmen will share more about social media, which is not my specialty as much. And it also just means your website. Something like looking at your website and seeing if it's generating email leads and if it's generating donations.
Fantastic. So what we're talking about today is direct response, how to use these techniques to ultimately to raise money. But there's some steps you have to go through before you can really profitably and maximally use direct response to raise money. There's a lot you have to get set up and to learn. I'm not trying to scare people here. It's not, you can do it, there's at different scales, but there's a lot you have to learn. So Carmen, from the tech stack, let's use the current jargon, tech stack perspective, what do you need to have in place to do both like a basic and maybe even a more advanced direct response program from a platform perspective?
Yeah. from a very basic perspective, if you don't have a website and you don't have an email marketing platform in place, you can actually start fundraising today on Facebook, on Instagram. There's social ways that you can do fundraising. And even with emails, if you don't have a paid system in place, there are many of the large providers who do have, for example, HubSpot, who do have smaller packages that are free for people to get started. So you can have that, and then they can also have landing pages, so you don't even have to have a website. So that would be the most basic to get started today. Ideally, you'd want to have a CRM. If you don't have a CRM, if you're starting out, maybe Excel spreadsheet, but something that, you know, you're gathering the information. You want to make sure you are collecting those names, that the email addresses that Stephanie was referring to. So website, a CRM tool, for example, like Salesforce or HubSpot, mail marketing platform, Mailchimp. There's so many out there, HubSpot again, and a payment gateway. And if you're starting out, because payment gateways can be a little tricky. If you're starting out, you can also go back to what I mentioned earlier via social media. Facebook has a payment system in place where you don't have to have a merchant account at all. You just do the transactions, and they actually hand over 100%. But there are some constraints with using that. So it's really important if you're first starting out to get an accurate reading of what of the technology that you have to be able to use to do the digital marketing or direct response, and to look at the pros and cons of doing a very basic, inexpensive approach versus a more planned approach with some budget that you can allocate. And it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars a month. It's very reasonable to have a situation where you could spend under a couple $100 a month or less than that, and have a good system to get your fundraising and on digital platforms up and running.
If you're in that situation, kind of startup phase, have questions about that, put them in the chat or the Q&A. Let me ask you, Carmen, as a follow-up. I'm a $5 million organization. I've got 5,000 active donors. I've got 10,000 emails. What kind of tech stack would you be looking at? You come in to do an audit, okay, with Anfield. What would you be wanting to see and say, okay, these people have it together. They have the foundation here to grow even further from that?
Absolutely. Having a really good CRM like Salesforce for nonprofits is a great one. HubSpot is also a really good one. What I would want to see in that database being structured correctly is tracking the donor journey. So, you know, as they come in, their behaviors. Behavioral tracking is something that is made for digital. It's very hard. Direct mail is great, but it's really hard to get immediate responses. With digital, we know how they're moving through from the email. Say Stephanie's group sends out an email. We know what they clicked on. We know how long they were on the page. We know what journeys they took. We know what they like, so we can really personalize subsequent communications with them.
Your CRM should be tracking all this. All this should be just automatically going into your CRM.
Absolutely, at the high level, because it is a pricey endeavor, and but that's one of the benefits of being able to afford those type of systems and having that kind of budget. So having a really great enterprise email marketing system. I tend to be partial to Mailchimp, but HubSpot has a really great one. Salesforce has their own as well. A lot of intelligence. There's also, and you probably hear a lot about this, machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to forecast behavior and to use that to obviously increase the fundraising performance. And that's something that's built into tools like Salesforce. So a lot of that's coming on board, but that's again at the very high enterprise level. So if you're a $5 million organization, that's what you're going to have. And then of course you have enterprise type systems for content marketing publishing. So you can publish to Facebook, you can publish to YouTube, and it's all centralized. And also the other thing is at that level, we're going to be talking about having budgets to do digital advertising. So you can do programmatic. So a lot of that, you're talking about display ads, text ads, social ads, even working with private publishers and publishing within their newsletters and on their websites or their other platforms. So you have a lot to play with when you have an organization with that kind of resources.
Well, that's why I want to say that out loud. I think there's some people here who maybe are at that level, aspire to be at that level, and then maybe that gives you some ideas where you need to get to. You know, the kind of budget. We'll get back to that kind of budget you need to allocate to this sort of effort. But those sort of enterprise level systems, CRM and the mailing thing and the payment processor and all the other stuff you just said, which you can remind people of later. I just want to plug our friends at Virtuous as well, who are also a good CRM. They also have their own automated marketing, digital journey stuff. So that would be another platform to check out.
Absolutely. And also you talked about the analytics reporting that we have at American Philanthropic. We're able to look at all of our clients' performance from direct mail to email to social to their paid advertising to see how it all works holistically, to see how they're performing overall in their fundraising efforts.
Yeah, that's the other functionality or capability you want to have. Again, if you're at that level.
If you're at that level. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or you want to aspire to get to that level. That's sort of where you want to get. Let's take a step back now. So we're just sort of laying the landscape here. We're back, Stephanie. I'll give you another scenario. I'm $1 million organization. Yeah, we want to go to 5, in 5 years. We got to grow our donor base, which means you have to grow our constituent base probably first, right? We need email addresses. Like, how do we get email addresses from people who are in our file now? We don't have email addresses for them. That's number one. And number two, emails for people who are not even in our file. How do you go about that?
Sure. I think the first thing is to remember that if you're at that level, if you're under $1 million, even if you're a $250,000 group, you have what you need to do email. You can get a very cheap Mailchimp account, and some of the best brands in the world are doing all they can, spending all of this time trying to get their emails to look as personal as yours are going to look if you're like the CEO and you're the one who's sending out emails. So don't discount where you are, first of all. But one thing that people don't necessarily think about when they ask the question, how do I get more email subscribers, is a goal. Do they have a certain number that they're trying to get, and why? So one way to set a goal for yourself would be to think about if you have been doing donation emails, what's your average rate of response? If you're getting the national average for nonprofits, it's 0.08% of people who receive your email are going to donate. So that means you need to send about 1,250 emails to get one donation.
Let's just sort of like stop on that for a second and pause. Not 0.8%.
No.
0.08%. So
0.08%.
Even more than direct mail, email solicitation is a numbers game.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a numbers game. And that you can make up for that when you have a smaller list in the beginning with more frequent sends. It's not that you just have that one chance, obviously, with your list.
Right.
You're not just looking at 0.08% return for the whole year, but
each time.
Yeah. So think about if email is something that's a goal for your organization, you want to figure out how much do I want to get in from email. If I'm getting $1 million a year in revenue, average online is probably like 15%, 25%, getting higher every year. And then what percentage of that do you expect to be email? So if you really want to grow by $250,000 and your average gift is $100, how many emails do you need to send? That's your goal for how much to grow your list. So now that you have a goal and you're thinking about it every single month, which is the number one thing to do if you want to grow your list, you can start with some things that are free. Email pop-up, WordPress. Every WordPress site has a free pop-up builder that you can use. I think it's just called Pop-Up Builder. Having something that just pops up.
All that to help you asking people for their emails through that, correct?
Yep. Asking people for your email from your website. We're like full circle on pop-ups. They were evil, they were terrible. Everyone wanted them to go away, and now they're back and everyone expects them. So that's where we are.
Incredibly effective, actually. We all hate them, but they work, and they work well.
Yeah. Let's kind of pause on that for a second. Are you guys? Would you be? Are you using those pop-ups to kind of keep people? Do they have to give you the email so they can read the article, or is it just an annoying thing to get rid of? You can read the whole thing. How does that? How would you see that?
Yeah, you can do it both ways. Especially, if you're a publisher, you probably have a paywall. But for all sorts of other nonprofits that aren't necessarily publishing a ton of content, a pop-up might be something like subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get updates, or even better, something that has a value proposition for the person subscribing. Share your email address to get this download of the 10 top ways you can support your local pet relief center today or something. So give them some reason to download something to get something for themselves in exchange for their email list or email address, because it is personal. It is personal. And don't clog it up with a bunch of fields. You don't necessarily need their first name, last name, address, zip code when you're just getting the email address. You can do things later on to get their first and last name, et cetera. But every field you add is going to reduce the number of people who subscribe. And then there are some paid ways that you can go about it. Facebook lead generation tools are excellent. They're pretty straightforward and they integrate directly with almost every major email platform. So you don't even have to worry about importing them later on. And that would be, the same kind of principles. You want to give them something for their email address. A newsletter, a short run newsletter can be great. If you don't have a lot of time, you're like, I can't do a weekly newsletter. I can't do a daily newsletter. Can you do a 5-part newsletter that's evergreen enough to keep using it the rest of the year? So you get people to subscribe for something of value. And then of course you can place ads in other email newsletters, which is kind of my favorite, because when somebody receives an email newsletter from a brand that they like, sees your ad and gives you their email address, they have shown you that they are the type of person who opens emails, clicks them, and takes an action.
And that there is a platform dependency or a channel consistency, I should say here, right? When it comes to email, just like there is in mail. Like a habitual mail donor is the best direct mail donor and prospect. A habitual email clicker and giver is the best. Am I right about that, Carmen?
Yeah, and really good point here is that, and we were talking about the actual mechanics and the channels, but if we take a step back at the strategic level, to make this all very effective, you really have to know your audience. You have to know what is going to trigger them to want to do something like Stephanie was talking about, getting the newsletter. So all that goes into the audience building and audience segmentation within direct response digital. And I think going back to the pop-up question and, some of the stuff that's gated behind a wall, like a content wall, or you have to do this to get, give me your email, so we'll send you this. Really understanding who the stakeholders are that are going to be drawn to your mission and crafting that message, that gives them the impetus to take action, because you've already gotten past one behavior, one objection that they might say, I don't want to give out my email, but this is a cause I really believe in. So they're really willing to do that. And to Stephanie's point about removing that friction, the easier it is to hand over their, say, first name and an email address to get them on the list. And then later on, building into the process, like Stephanie said, it's kind of like a journey where you're kind of encouraging them to give more and more information as they build trust, because what's very central to all this is relationships. And that's why we really need to understand the audience. And then we use these channels to get them to take action. So we get their email, we nurture that, and eventually, get a first donation, and then put them on a track for a second donation, and put them on a journey to become lifetime valued members of the organization by their donations and their support.
You're getting to my next question, actually. So I'm going to slow you down on it, because no, it's good. So to get emails, I'm just going to recap here a second. First of all, kind of set a goal, like how many emails do you want? And that goal should derive from how much revenue am I trying to derive potentially from this channel? And you can work backwards from the math to know how many email addresses you might want to get. You can do that through Facebook lead generation, to pop up on your own website. You can, what was the third thing you said? You can pay, the newsletter, banner ads, and sort of allied organizations, newsletters, or where your stakeholders, your audience is hanging out. And then just worth mentioning here, I don't want to get too much in these weeds here. There are brokers, right? There are broker email lists out there in the world, right? That you can obtain emails from them. And that's another good way to do it, I assume. It's just, we're getting more expensive, each one of these things I'm saying, correct? All right.
Yep, that's right. I think, and with the email brokers, one really important thing, if you're going to use an email broker to get names or to do a rented list or something, is to make sure that you can, to Carmen's earlier point, track those people and see if it was worth your while, especially to make sure that they're going to give again. Because one of the sort of issues that you can have when you are doing rental is like, great, you had a great offer, this person gave you money one time, and then they fall off the face of the planet. So before you do a list broker type of exchange, you probably want to make sure that you have at least a welcome series or something that's going to bring them into the life of your organization.
You're bringing me back to the point where we're going next. That's great. So Carmen, that's exactly the question I want to ask you. When I acquire emails, I spent a month acquiring, I got 1,000 emails through all the stuff I did. What do I do with these things? Like what do I do?
Ideally, again, going back to the strategy and the planning, ideally you plan for that. And so you know what your audience is, and you develop these personas, you know, typical people who are going to want to be involved with your organization and to give to your organization. So as soon as that first campaign goes out and they've signed up and they have given your email address, right from the get-go, they're getting a thank you for signing up. We appreciate this. And then they're going to get emails on a certain cadence. And that's, you know, it's predefined during the campaign planning, but never, ever get their email address.
You don't have a plan.
You know, yeah, no plan.
So
Because
what you start, first of all, is there needs to be a plan. Before you even get emails, you need to have a plan in place for what you're going to do, because you have a welcome series, like Stephanie just said. You have to know what your cadence is. You have to know what it is you're saying based on who you think these people are.
yeah, you have to think the workflow through, and I like to come at it, like you mentioned digital audit a little bit earlier. When I'm doing a digital audit, I come through with the mentality of a first-time visitor. Like, I'm new to this organization. I'm going through their website, or I'm going through their social, I'm signing up for their email. And there have been many, you know, from small organizations to large organizations where things fall apart after I sign up. I give you my email. I've given you the one thing that you're working so hard for and that you spend so much resources on. And then it's like, I never hear from you again, or maybe I do, and it's like 3 months later and I don't know who you are, and you haven't taken the time. It goes back to building that relationship and building trust. So there's a lot of consumer behavioral psychology that goes into this as well. So ideally what you would do in the planning phases is to plan out what campaigns are going to happen and what's going to happen when you get that email address. Go through the different workflows. You know, somebody goes this way, what branches do they follow? What path are they on? Yeah. Where do we want them to go? I think of it as holding their hands and helping them walk through the path and making it easy for them.
Building a stronger relationship with your organization. How soon? I'll ask you. I got 2 questions here. I'm going to get to you, Jeremy, and Hope in 1 second. I got one more question for Carmen. That journey, how long from the time I get your email address? I'm doing my plan. I haven't started this yet. I'm doing my plan. Maybe Stephanie, I'll let you answer this question actually. How long from the time I get your email address until I make my first email solicitation of you? What should that time period be? And how many cultivation pieces emails should be received before that happens?
Mm-hmm. I think at a basic and aggressive level, if you want to get to that solicitation as quickly as possible, if you have an automation that's welcoming them right away and sharing something about your mission and getting some buy-in, a second email to them that asks them to do an action that's not donating, to kind of get them to raise their hand, like, I'm interested, I'm your people. Something like a survey, like if you are a consumer organization, your survey might be, what is the one issue that you feel is facing you as a consumer right now, right? So they're kind of giving you some feedback about why they think your mission is important, and then they're starting to think of themselves as someone who thinks about consumer issues. And so if you only do those 2 emails, you're probably ready for a solicitation. If you're being pretty aggressive, which I would definitely say you should, if you can, why not? I wouldn't really go more than 2 or 3.
It's not like you have to go 2 months, 22 emails before we solicit.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I think that could be a question there. All right. I got 2 questions here. One is germane to this conversation. I'm gonna go back to Hope. So Jeremy asked, you guys see in the chat, hey, isn't it bad? You can't buy email lists. You're violating these laws. Carmen, tell us how that's actually not.
Okay.
That cannot be the case. This is all up and up.
GDPR, that's a European regulation, and you do have to take special considerations when you are working within the European market. There are, within the United States, more and more of that happening in California. I think it's the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection Act, where they're starting to come down a little harder on people who are brokering these lists. So that's why there's the opt-outs. That's one thing, going back to the email, always have the option that they can opt out on anything. For example, I've seen a way that some organizations will gather emails is transactional, like after they've given a donation, or say for a brand, say a Target or IKEA. When you have a transaction, it's because you bought something with them. And by law in this country, in the United States, that's a transactional email. They really aren't supposed to take that email and promote to you other things. So that's why there's, you have to opt in if you want to get those kind of promotional emails. So that is a subject that is, I think, becoming more and more important every day. And that's one of the reasons I kind of pulled back. I'm considering email brokered list for that reason. Plus, a lot of it is, I think it's much better as an organization to look at allied or aligned organizations and to work through their newsletters. Or we had a client project last year where they did advertise to, or they did email to someone else's email list, but it was completely aligned and it was all opted in, and it did really, really well. So from my point of view, if asked for my advice on that, I would tell them to look for aligned organizations, or even others that, I know this doesn't sound intuitive, but sometimes even a competing organization where there might be some kind of alignment for a specific effort. That might be an option too, over going with brokered email list, which I want to make it clear too, it's different than brokered direct mail list. Email is just a kind of a different beast, and the rules are a little different.
Hopefully, Jeremy, there are ways. I think there are ways to do it. And I think if you go for the reputable broker, they can help you navigate that. So if like active engagement, Next After, a couple of partners that we often work with, and then of course Amphil, we could help you navigate that question. But it's a good one to rate. You do have, as Carmen's pointing out, there's some things to be aware of if you're renting or buying email lists. Usually, Hope Johnson, what donation platforms or payment gateways do you recommend, Stephanie?
Oh, this is definitely a Carmen question.
Oh, Carmen,
I'll take that right back.
What donation platforms / payment gateways do you recommend?
Yeah, again, going back to the point about making sure it's reputable, like you were talking about some other organizations, like for the list brokerage. So definitely Stripe is a big one. There's lots of them out there. I would definitely do homework on that, but I think Keenan, or trying to narrow it down to the 3 top ones in the industry, is where I would direct people as far as a payment gateway. And there are lots. So
Virtuous has their own that's built in if you're on Virtuous. Jeremy Miller points out Kindful, which is a big one. That's great. Yeah, and Stripe.
Yeah, Stripe, the Apple Pay. There's a lot, like even with Facebook, there's so many different payment processors. And it's not just, you want to look for ones that are reputable, but you also want to look for integrations, and all the big ones are usually easily integrated. You can easily integrate them with a WordPress site, your website site, other ways that you prefer to take payment. Even if you want to look at somewhat a little bit outside of digital, but like SMS or messaging apps. Yeah,
right. Do you have thoughts on Apple Pay, Google Pay, and crypto? We have a question about that.
Yeah, I'm good with all of them. Those are the big players. Crypto is very interesting. Some of the big nonprofits like the Red Cross, American Cancer Society, and some others are actually and have been taking crypto for the last 2 years. So I know it's kind of scary right now with the crypto market. But
I personally would convert all crypto payments immediately to some other currency, but you do whatever you want. You do you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about crypto, because the way that the nonprofits are handling it is that they do convert it right away. They don't hold on to it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Um, all right, let's Stephanie. Here's something fun that I think people maybe don't think about as much as they should. Wealth screening their list. How does that work? What are we talking about there, and how does that work?
Sure. So one of the things that we've had great experience with recently is wealth screening after a big email push when you've got, 500, 1,000 new email addresses coming in. For instance, we were working with Active Engagement, who you just mentioned, as they're a email group. They only do email and they really specialize in growing lists. So, I think they're great. They do really good work. There are a few things that you really want to watch for if you are investing the kind of money it takes to grow your list, which, like we talked about earlier, is getting a second gift, but also something like figuring out if the leads that you're getting are possible major donors can really make that a worthwhile investment for you. So this one group I was working with got about 9,000 new subscribers through a petition, and we screened them for them. And out of those people, we found 50 people who had a capacity above $500,000 to $1 million. And then there was even one that had a wealth capacity of $10 million. So those people are now assigned to a major gifts officer, and you might have never known that they were in your email list. Which another good reason to do that is so you're not shocked when you get a big gift from somebody. So
I guess the point here is that those people didn't necessarily give the biggest gifts, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're $10
you would
a
never
month or
find it
something.
if you didn't do the wealth screen. What tool did you use to do the wealth screening, and how much did it cost?
So we do wealth screenings at AmPhil for our clients through iWave and Donor Search.
This was not meant to be an advertisement for us, so but yeah, we do it, but you can do it on your own, right? Through other ways you can do it on your own or not.
I am most familiar with Donor Search, where I think you do it based on a number of names that you're putting in, and you can get wealth information back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Marguerite Anders points out they like Donor Search. Yeah, we like Donor Search, right?
Yeah.
There's also Wealth Engines, one we used to use. I think we kind of moved away from that. iWave is another one you mentioned, right, Stephanie?
Yeah. Yep. And then some CRMs do a little bit of wealth screening. So if you are integrating the way that you should, your email prospects in with your main CRM, which should be your single source of truth. If you have wealth screening, if you use Bloomerang, they have some wealth screening. And I think there are some, like, you can get a Donor Search add-on for Salesforce, et cetera. So think about if you have that in your CRM, maybe you should do a big upload of your email addresses.
Yeah. I guess the point here is, like, we just see people not even think to do this, right? They might only wealth screen their file once a year, maybe once every couple of years. I think but you can be doing it on a regular basis. It's very cheap, right?
Yeah, very affordable.
Something like that. I don't know. It's cheap, and you can put people, not only do they go into the stream that you planned for people based on their reactions, your responses to your email and subsequent emails, but also you can pull some people into another stream as well. I'm not saying out of the first stream, although that's a good question for you guys, but into a major gifts portfolio, right, as a prospect.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you pull those people out, by the way, of your
Absolutely not
welcome series? Absolutely not. Thank you.
Very, very rarely would I ever suppress major donors. What I would do is give them slightly different messaging. So if you're doing a campaign, the best way to do it is to have 4 segments: major donors, active donors, lapsed, and prospect, and have slightly different language for each of those. If you can swing it. If you can't, just throw something in like, even if you've already given, or thanks to all who have already given. And
right. You can weasel word your way out of it if you don't have the time and resources to do segmentation. But that's a good 4 major. I like that: major, active, lapse, and prospects. Talking to them a little bit differently. I was going to give an anecdote here, by the way. It's not an email anecdote, but it's a mail anecdote. We just heard it from a client the other day. They leave, but I think it's good practice, their major donors in their direct mail. And I don't even know if they are scrawling a personal note on these. The woman who is the major donor, I'm going to talk about here in a second, is a major donor, like 7-figure donor. So I don't know. Maybe they just sent the mail. I don't know that answer. What I know is, far from being upset that she got the mail, she liked it so much. And there was an enclosure, a calendar or something like that, that she asked for 10 more of the pieces. She's going to share the calendar with her friends, or whatever the piece was, a prospectus, I don't recall, but and just loved it. Loved the information, loved the the energy she saw in the piece. So I know sometimes major donors can get wonky sometimes if they're left in these comm streams, but more often than not, you're probably better off leaving them in.
If you're really worried about it, add something to your preferences center that allows them to opt out specifically of fundraising emails. And you can use that to suppress your major donors who get angry.
That's
but
great.
They won't. They're your major donor. They're the ones who love you the most. They want to hear from you.
Yeah, that's right. Carmen, can you answer Brady's question about God, we got all these lists floating around. We got a Mailchimp list. We got this list over here. We got our events list. I don't know, Brady, I'm making all that up, but I've seen this situation. I know it's a frustrating one. How do you recommend making one source of truth out of all these lists? What should they do?
So within these lists, Brady, if you could put it in the chat and let us know, is it different contacts per the list, or is it one general list and then you have all these different segments for them?
I assume it's different contacts. I'm going to guess. There might be some overlap, but let's just assume that it's different contacts.
What we've been doing with clients is that our place of truth is the CRM. So we put the data in there, and you will have to look for duplicates, and that's something that's easily done when bringing the data over. Okay, so he's talking about subscription list and Mailchimp list.
Yeah.
So what are the difference between those two, Brady? Assuming like the subscription list is people who haven't donated yet, they're subscribers but not donors.
But I think regardless, the point here is that it should all be coming out of your CRM, right, Carmen?
Yeah, the CRM should be the one source of truth. It should be coming in from
all of these into your CRM. The CRM can do dedupe for you, or someone who's competent can do that for you. That we do that kind of thing. Other firms do it. You might have somebody on staff. That's great. But I think the point is that your CRM is a single. There should not be, well, we've got our database over here, but we have our Mailchimp list over here, and we have something, right? That's a disaster waiting to happen.
It is, and it's just, yeah, it's best if you have one source of truth. And in this case, I would always recommend the CRM. So
yeah, and then you can pull out of that for Mailchimp. Like Mailchimp is going to talk to Salesforce, right? Carmen?
It does, yeah. Yes, the integrations have to be right. That's the key thing here.
Right.
The integrations, the communications between the two.
Keep one source of truth, and that is your CRM. Stephanie, am I saying anything you don't agree with?
Nope, I agree with all that. I think and people who have been using Mailchimp for a long time or one system for a long time often will get to the point where they don't just have some emails in Mailchimp and some in Salesforce. They have 4 or 5 different audiences in Mailchimp, and that's definitely something where, as much as possible, put everything into the same list, because the automatic deduplication will happen, and then use tags or groups or something smaller to get to the more specific information.
And that goes into, again, keep going back to planning. So you want to have really good planning for your marketing technology stack and how the different applications communicate with one another. So
it's pretty good Scotch today. I had a breakfast this morning and then I had like an hour till my lunch. So I went and had a cigar because I had an hour to kill, and now I had lunch, and now I'm drinking Scotch, and then I have our pizza, wine, and fundraising happy hour here in Phoenix in like 2 hours after this is over. So
that's what it's like to work at American Philanthropic.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm not complaining. This is a pretty good life. All right, back to the topic, Carmen. All right, so we're sending out we're sending out emails now. You hear a lot about testing and optimization. What are we talking about? When we talk about that, what are we doing?
With emails, and this is built into a lot of the systems. Mailchimp is an example of that. But you want to be able to test if you have a large enough audience to do this with. You want to be able to test things like subject line, or even creatives, which is the copy or the images, the call to actions. So those kind of things you can test in what's called split testing, A/B. So you change one element, keep it really, really simple at this basic level. And then, so one is, for example, something you've already been doing, and then another one has a change in it. So you want to test and see which one performs better. And then the winner of that goes off to being sent to everybody. But you do have to have you have to have a decent sized audience to do that. So you can have, is that way you get statistically significant results.
But the point is, don't just send out, if you can. I know this takes a little bit, maybe this isn't your startup phase, but next, just one email with one subject line. But it's nice for always testing subject lines against each other, right? To find one that really works well, or as you said, creative, or a look to the email. I mean, certainly we know, I'm going to put a plug in here for our friends at nextafter.com. They do a ton of research on digital fundraising and digital direct response, and it's all free. So you just go there, they just share it at nextafter.com, and they've really interesting findings, which I haven't looked at for a while. So one I remember, there's two I remember, I guess. Well, one is that kind of the uglier the email, the better. So people often want to make these, you guys stop me if you think I'm crazy or I'm misremembering the research, but like one thing I'm finding is if it's kind of ugly and basic, it looks personal. It looks more real, is at least the theory. Those emails can tend to do better than highly designed emails. And the other thing I think is always like longer emails often do better than shorter emails, but I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that, or if I'm misremembering.
It all depends on the recipients and the organization, the messaging. That's why I'm a real huge proponent of testing. I mean, looking at you want to look at what industry is doing and what the benchmarks are. But in the end, the best practices are what's working within your organization. And I have seen, where something is very simple actually outperforms something that was super highly designed. And it probably goes to, it's very personal. But what's really great about being able to test it, if you have the size, is that you're able to build on that and you can continue to build it. But if you don't have enough of an audience to test, you can also, looking at the analytics afterwards of how things performed. A lot of these tools, I know Mailchimp has it. It give you information on the open rates, and then you can look at it campaign versus campaign if you don't have enough of an audience to test things out. And also looking at their heat maps on how people interacted. So where a lot of clicks happen by a heat map. So these are things that you can build on, even if you can't do full multi or split testing at that time because you don't have large enough audience. But there are things that you can do little by little to continue to optimize and improve performance. So I just want to put that out there. So you don't have to feel like, oh, we don't have, 5,000 to 10,000 people to be able to do this with. We have a small group. Okay, so at this time, we can't do something that's statistically significant, but you can still look at your performance results and have learnings from that to improve the next campaign.
Very good.
Yeah, I think the other key thing to remember if you're going with the uglier email works better logic is that it doesn't mean every email has to be ugly. It can often mean like when you need a showstopper amount of donations to come in for your, you need 499, you have 499 donations, you need 550 to unlock a matching gift challenge. Like you're going to send a plain text email. It's urgent, it's personal. They think you just wrote it. It's that kind of authenticity thing that Marguerite was talking about. But in your newsletters, you want to present your brand and do something that's a little bit.
An ugly newsletter, maybe. That's not what I was talking about. That would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be certainly be counterintuitive. We could test the ugly newsletter, Stephanie. Yeah, you never know. I agree with you. I totally agree.
One quick note, so we talked about privacy earlier. A lot of what's been done with email in the past is going to be changing thanks to things like the Apple iOS updates. So testing in the past to see open rates and stuff, that provided a lot of information. And now the way things are set up for anybody on Apple Mail, basically the email is downloaded. So it looks like it opened, but it's not actually been opened. So as you're thinking about things for your own organization, keep in mind that there's also a world outside of your digital marketing within your organization that's changing. There's cookies are going away. What Apple's changes, how it impacts your marketing. So look at the entire ecosystem and how it affects your digital marketing and your fundraising.
No, well, that's great. And also like so way over my head. It's impressive. I like it. It's great. It's good. It tells you there's lots of things to consider in this field. I'm going to bring it back to interpersonal relationships, Stephanie. Because we have a great plan. We have a great plan. We have great copywriters. We know what we're doing. We know how we're going to test. We got analytics we're going to deploy on the back end. But gosh darn it, our CEO or CMO or Chief Advancement Officer, whoever it is, who has to approve copy, like just doesn't move, doesn't get off his or her desk. It's just paralyzing sometimes for people. How can we get around the C-suite approval bottleneck problem?
Yeah, it's very, very common, especially in a smaller organization. But you are definitely trying to send as many personal emails as possible. So you want to use the biggest name you can find. But of course, if you use this person's name, they're going to have to approve it. So how can you get around that bottleneck? One thing that I always suggest is where is this person publishing that already has approved content that you can start with? So if the CEO of your organization is prolific on Twitter, I would go there first and copy and paste different pieces from different tweets into something that becomes an email.
Who wrote
when
this
you share it
nonsense?
with that person.
You did, ma'am. Oh,
exactly. You remind them like, hey, this is your words already. So you should be predisposed to say yes. Second, you can remind them that the single best performing email you will ever send is an email with a mistake in it. Because then you get to send an email with correction in the subject line, and you're going to see.
People do that on purpose? I've always wondered, do people do that on purpose?
I think some organizations do. I don't think that most of the types of groups we work with would do that, but some do. But be thankful when you're starting out, if you're making mistakes, that you can do it a little bit more organically. And then the other thing you can do is make an approval structure workflow that's itself approved from this person. So say, I'm going to send an email. It's not from Jeremy Beer, it's from American Philanthropic, but he's, my direct boss and the one who wants to approve everything. So a better way to do it.
I want to be clear that I'm not like that here.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But two ways you could do it. One are either Jeremy approves it personally or two other staffers approve it. So you can, if this is like in your workflow and, Jeremy says, this is a good way to keep representing our brand and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. You have the go ahead. So try to talk about the workflow ahead of time.
Yeah, getting the CEO drunk is a good business as well, John. Yeah, that's actually next level itself.
That is.
Might have diminishing returns. Okay, some pretty incoherent copy. Depends on what kind of drunk they are, I suppose.
Very authentic copy.
That's very good. Repurposing copy, it's already been approved. That's a really good idea. Trying to come to an understanding ahead of time. And just think, this is a super time sensitive program we're talking about here. This isn't, pretty much most things are in fundraising, but trying to having to come to Jesus, I would say, before this thing even starts. This isn't going to work if, John, Mary, whatever their name, we know how busy you are. It's just not going to work if you have to, if things get bottlenecked. How can we get around that? I think I would just even encourage a candid conversation with your CEO about that. Do it in a winsome and humorous way, if possible. Talk about plying them with Scotch. Carmen, by the way, queue's open. I'll answer any question now. We're in the last 10 minutes here. So as soon as I say that, I see I see a question come through. That'll be a good one for Carmen. Carmen, we have a question about text. It only came, not to everyone, it came to me. I'm supposed to ask you. What about texting donors and prospects? What about tools out there that nonprofits can use to automate texts? Do you know anything about this world? Can you speak to it?
Yeah, there's several ways you can use SMS. And go back to Mailchimp. They're a pretty complete system, but there are a whole bunch of others out there. And I believe that we work with at least one organization that has been using texting for donors, and it's been incredibly successful. But it's part of an overall campaign. For example, direct mail, it's integrated. So it's not really standalone, but it's also a really great way, especially because you already have their phone numbers. I would say their mobile phone numbers for house file donors. It's another way of keeping up with them, or if there's an urgent need for something, which I usually, I know we try to stay away from doing things that are urgent, but if, for example, like even with advocacy, you can use that as not only a form to raise funds, but for having your supporters and your donors take action to sign a petition, record a video. Again, that's direct response, taking immediate action. So there's a lot of ways that you can use text. I think it's a great addition to an integrated approach.
Can you do texting through Mailchimp?
It's SMS.
Wow.
And Mailchimp also has AI built into it to work with Facebook. They're a pretty robust system. And Campaign Monitor is another one. I think Active Campaign, there's several out there. And then there are other organizations that's all they do. They handle texting. And
yeah, I'm trying to think of the one in DC that we've worked with. Shoot, I can't think of their name, but somebody thinks of it, they can let me know. Yeah, so texting integrated into the rest of your campaign can be good, and we're seeing some really good results. That it's sort of odd to only do texting, I think, unless you're doing for advocacy purposes or something like that. I know a lot of political campaigns, but I think in our world, integrating texting with direct mail and email together is a really, and social posts even, although you're usually going to raise that much money through your social posts, but just kind of amplifying the message and making sure it's being seen everywhere it can. See, that seems to be the best approach by far. Okay, Stephanie, with time running out here, I want to talk to you about time running out, which I don't mean dying, I mean year end. And even though it's crazy, we're June 23rd, but we're already thinking about year end here at Amphil. The most 70%, something like that, of C3 revenue comes in from November 15th to December 31st on average across the United States, something like that. So it's a huge time of year. Talk to me about year end. Like, what's something I can do this summer to start to getting ready for year end?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not saying that you should start listening to Christmas music or anything, but there's a lot that you can do right now. There are a lot of things that if you get to November and you haven't done them, you're going to really be kicking yourself. So first of all, I think the tracking is the most important thing to figure out if you're trying to get your house in order. Make sure you know when you send a donation or when you send an email, which donations come in from that specific email, because in the end of year, hopefully you'll be sending 15 to 20 email efforts and you want to know which one works and pivot. More than any other campaign, the end of year, you're going to be pivoting during the campaign. Something you can do is identify subscribers who haven't opened an email in 6 months right now. So try to re-engage those people because it's always easier to re-engage someone who already cares about you than to find somebody new. But also find somebody new. This is a great time to invest money in getting some new leads. Think about your goals for the end of the year, especially if you're in the C-suite, if you're a director, if you're someone who has an email programmer under you, think about what you want them to accomplish in the end of year and how you're going to set them up for success right now. And then you probably are going to want to start thinking about ways you can either integrate your CRM if you haven't already, or do a couple of kind of tricks to make it feel integrated. So if you are looking to your end of year campaign, it's the best time to tell someone like you donated last year, but you haven't donated yet this year. So like I'm talking to you, person who donated in November of 2021. You can do that kind of email even without an integration if you just add like 3 fields. So right now, go into your Mailchimp and add the fields, last donation, date, last donation amount, and then maybe, whether it's a sustaining gift that's monthly or a one-time. So if you make a habit of on the 1st of every month, exporting from your CRM and importing to your Mailchimp with just those 3 fields, you can fake an integration and you can speak to people much more personally, which is something you definitely want to do because e-renewal emails are way higher performing than anything else. I think the last end of year campaign that I ran with a client, they're getting about 0.09% conversion rate on all fundraising emails. Their e-renewal, which is the one that says, hi, Carmen, you donated last year, not this year, please renew, got 6.14% return. So you want to be able to do that, figure out your data and how to get a one-to-one relationship based on that person's giving.
That's good advice. Carmen, last word here. We got 4 minutes left. is now a good time? Maybe it's not. Year end, like 6 months away, but when is and how important is it to do a digital audit?
As soon as possible. The sooner the better. If any issues are surfaced, they can be corrected and everything will be ready to go when you're ready to start kicking off end of year planning, because there's a lot of things that happen before we even hit that send email campaign. So all those things need to be in place before that first campaign even happens. So making sure that your digital stack, your marketing technology stack, from your CRM to your email marketing platform to your payment gateway to your welcome series, making sure all that's in place and it's all working correctly, and funneling the prospective donor through, having that in place, the sooner the better. And I like to start thinking about end of year, and this is because I also do direct mail. We do direct mail and integrated direct response. So we start early. So for me, I'm already thinking about it now, and campaigns we start developing and start building around August timeframe. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, no time like the present. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If this is just a little Scotch talk, it's informal. It includes me, which always kind of makes things go off the rails. But we have a real class, a master class on this topic, specifically about integrating your direct mail and your digital outreach together 1 week from today on June 30th. I believe it's at 1 o'clock Eastern. You can find out more about it at Amphil. Well, look, I see the link just popped up magically in the chat box. There you go. I really highly recommend it if you're interested. It's not very expensive. It's a 3-hour class on how to integrate direct mail with your digital outreach. And I think it'd be valuable to you if you like this sort of thing, and if you're in charge of this sort of thing in particular. But regardless, thank you for being with us. We wish everybody well. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for letting us know who you are. Loved having people from Endow and Bluegrass Institute and the American Burn Association, I think I saw on here, and New Atlantis, and everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all the work you all do for our civil society in our country. So thanks a lot. We'll see you down the line. Appreciate it.